So Steven Spielberg's new film Disclosure Day is here. Finally. So let's talk about it. Now I want to be clear about something out the gate. I really like this movie. So much so that I fully expect this movie to still be sitting inside my top 10 at the end of this year. But the first thing we gotta talk about with this movie is that it is not the type of film that I was expecting. And I would even go so far as to say this movie actually feels like the prequel to the film that I believed Disclosure Day was going to be. You see, through all the marketing for this film, I was really under the impression that this is a movie about how the world will react once it learns that we are not alone. But it's not. Like, if we were to break up the story of the world finding out about extraterrestrial life, you could basically break it up into two segments. One is the struggle and the fight to actually get the information out there to the world, and the second part of that is how the world reacts and adapts once it has the information. And in Disclosure Day, we are doing the former, not the latter. This is not a story about the world coping with the information that there's aliens among us. This is a story about the struggle to actually bring that information to the world. And part of me was thinking, like, hey, did I misinterpret the marketing for this movie? Like, maybe I was tripping out. And maybe that's never what this film suggested itself to be. But no, like, I actually went back and watched some of the trailers after seeing the film, and this movie very much presents itself as a film about the world reacting to this information. Like, there's so many shots in the trailers of people reacting to this supposedly groundbreaking piece of information, and in the trailers, it's all edited to look like it's them reacting to that scene of Emily Blunt beatboxing. And no spoilers, but let's just say those shots are from a different part of the movie. Because again, that is not what this movie is about. This movie is not actually about the world finding out, it's about getting us to the point where the world can find out. And right after I finished watching this movie, I was like, man, there was another movie that made me feel this exact same way. Another movie that made me feel like it was actually a prequel to the film that the title suggested it was going to be. And I just couldn't put my finger on it as I was leaving the theater, as I was getting in the car, and then finally, as I was driving home, it hit me. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Now don't worry, I won't spoil it for any of you who haven't seen it, but for those of you who have seen Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, that is a film titled Multiverse of Madness. But the film itself actually feels like a lead up to the events where the multiverse is actually gonna go mad. Where the film ends off at a point where we are now ready for the multiverse to go crazy. We're now ready for the real multiverse of madness, but the film itself was just kind of getting us to that point. And Disclosure Day is exactly the same way. This is less of a film about Disclosure Day actually happening and the fallout of it, and much more about the lead up to us getting there. And that actually has some pretty big implications for what this story ends up being. Because instead of it being a global political fallout of how society copes with the idea of not being alone, it ends up being much more of a sort of straightforward conspiracy thriller chase movie, where the vast majority of this movie is just our two main characters being chased around by the government. Like, that's what it is. We have our two characters that are trying to blow the whistle, played by Josh O'Connor and Emily Blunt, and basically the entire movie is just a very long sequence of them being chased around by these bad government people who want to suppress the truth. But even though it's not what I thought it was going to be, it is actually pretty damn good for what it actually is. As I alluded to with this movie, it is really a two-person show. Josh O'Connor and Emily Blunt. Wyatt Russell is also in here playing Emily Blunt's boyfriend, and he is hilarious in here, as their dynamic together provides the only real comedic relief throughout this film, as they have a really nice, fun dynamic together. Now, what the film does a really good job of, especially through the first half of the movie, is having a really engaging sort of mystery going on. When it comes to Josh O'Connor's character, we actually start with him very much in the middle of his story, where he is already on the run from these government people, so much so that for the first 10 minutes of this movie, I was convinced that we were gonna do a flashback. Like, I was convinced that this movie was starting off, and then it was gonna be one of those things where after an intense opening sequence, we cut to the traditional 3 days earlier and show us how we got there. But no, the movie just decides we're putting you right into it, and you will understand what's happening as we go. And I think that was a really smart choice for the film, as it was able to hook me right out the gate. Similarly, for Emily's character, while we do actually get to see her from the beginning of her story and how she kind of gets pulled into all of this, nevertheless, her story is also shrouded in mystery of why are these things happening to her, why specifically her, what is even going on with her, and like what is she able to do here? There's so many questions that pull you in, and it's really what made this film, especially during that first half, something that had me gripped the entire time. Pacing-wise, I thought the film flew by. It is 2.5 hours long, and it feels long in the sense of you feel the scope of the movie. Like, when you get to the end, you do feel like you've been on quite a journey and you've covered a lot of stuff, but it doesn't feel long in terms of the actual runtime. Like, it never felt like a slog to sit through. And with this being a chase movie, the chases are just really well done. Like, there are some incredible action scenes in this film. The one that most people seem to be aware of is that train sequence that they showed off in the trailers. But for me, there was a car chase sequence that was just riveting, and truly one of the better sequences that I've seen in any movie this year, where Spielberg just knows how to make those sequences feel so intense, with just the right amount of spectacle, but also things that are constantly going wrong along the way, and our characters having to be clever and problem solve. It's all there. There's also this really cool concept of dives in this movie, where the government officials have the ability to perform what is called a dive, where you can sort of go into the mind of someone and talk to them as if you're in the room, even though you're really not there. And for lack of a more sophisticated reasoning, it was just kind of sick. Like, it was just a really cool method to see how they were able to get information out of people, how they were able to manipulate and control people, and add an element of danger to scenes, even when the bad guys are physically actually quite far away. Now, I do have to say, the movie does become significantly less interesting once the central mystery around our two main characters starts to get answers. And I know what you're thinking. You're probably like, isn't that how every mystery works? Like, you don't know what's happening first, and then the movie tells you, and yes, that's true, guys. But here, it's not like there's a big payoff to the mystery where it's like you're following this unknown, and then there's a big answer that's super satisfying. Not really. Here, the mystery kind of just fizzles out as it goes on, where it starts off very intriguing and you're really engaged and wondering what's going on here, and then as it becomes more clear what's really going on and why these characters specifically, it's not bad, but it's just okay as far as answers go. And so that intrigue that initially was making the movie really engaging just kind of dissipates as the movie goes on. And so definitely as we move into the second half of the film, it wasn't able to keep that level of engagement as high as we had in the first half. And ultimately, while I wouldn't say this movie falls off by any means, there was definitely a part of me that was maybe a little bit disappointed with where the movie ends, because it felt to me like it ended right at the part of the story that I personally would have been most interested in, where if this was like the first episode of a show, it would have been a long episode, but this would be a banger first episode. But with that said, I would like to see where we go from here, because it feels like we got to the point that I was most interested in with this movie, and the movie just kind of wraps it up and is not interested in exploring or going into that territory of now what happens. Which is why I keep saying this film really does feel like more of a prequel to the real meat of the story that I would have been most interested in. Like, I was reading some of the Rotten Tomatoes reviews after, and I saw this one guy who said, the movie ended where it should have began. And even though I did enjoy this movie a lot, I can't help but share a similar sentiment where I would love to get a sequel to this movie. I would love to see what happens now, but frankly, I just don't think that's gonna happen. Number one, because Spielberg doesn't really do sequels other than like Indiana Jones, and I also just don't think this film is gonna be enough of a smash hit at the box office to really warrant that. So if you are planning to see this film, just know this is a story about the fight to get this information out to the world and to see how much of that information you can get out there, in what shape or form can you get that information out there, but it is not a story about what happens to the world and society as a whole once that information is out there for everybody to know. But anyways, guys, these are just my thoughts on Disclosure Day. Whatever you guys think, let me know down in the comments. And if you like this video and want to watch another, just click somewhere on the screen to see what YouTube thinks you'd like. And hopefully, I'll see you guys in the next one.